Happy Devils Monday. Breaking news. The Devils have recalled Louis Domingue from Binghamton, and Cory Schneider is now on waivers, waiting to be cleared and assigned to Binghamton. I am your host, Sam Wu, host of the Let's Go Devils podcast. I think we all expected this. I think we definitely all expected this. But when it happens, you just get a little teary-eyed because we were all rooting for Cory in all this. But the emergence of Mackenzie Blackwood, Mac Black, that's what we called him last night, he has been on fire. And Ray Shuro decided to make the move on the Bobby's Auto Care hotline to discuss what has just transpired in the last couple hours is Bruce Zeman of Vox Sports. He's a Vox Sports NHL analyst. Bruce, you're on the Bobby's Auto Care hotline. How are you today?
Sam, thanks for having me on the podcast, man. I'm a big fan. It always sounds great.
Thank you. So this doesn't seem to be a shock or a surprise when the Devils acquired Louis Domingue. We kind of saw it coming, but, again, with Cory Schneider, I mean, when he came over from Vancouver in that trade on at the 2013 NHL draft, I still can't believe it actually just happened. I mean, the writing was on the wall. I think a lot of us expected it. What are your thoughts on this move?
You know something, Sam? I agree with you 100%. And, it was funny. I was thinking about this earlier today. This goes back a number of years. And, for Cory Schneider, who seems to be a genuinely good guy, I don't think any goalie at all, unless there's another goalie with a monstrous ego, could have come into this situation and fared well. If you think about this, go back to 2013, 2014, who except someone like a Patrick Waugh or a Ron Hextall or pick another huge ego goalie could come in and follow someone like Martin Brodeur? Who is going to come in and be able to follow in those footsteps and succeed? Obviously, your play dictates whether or not you're loved by the fan base and the management, which, to be honest, Cory had some trouble with. But I'm still kind of surprised that it came to this. But I'm not 100% convinced that he's healthy. I haven't been convinced since he came back. I think some of it has to do with his confidence. And, being sent to the AHL is not the end of things. You never know what can happen in this sport.
Absolutely. And I can't imagine a team picking him up on waivers and absorbing the salary, especially the last 2 years he has had. But sorry, I just my phone just popped up the Facebook Live group. But Bruce, it was an impossible task to replace Martin Brodeur. It was absolutely impossible. He had some great years with New Jersey, but the team wasn't playing up to par. And I've seen it on social media and some of the fan reaction. I don't know if you agree with this, that it was kind of like when he was in his prime, getting into his prime, before the injury started to happen, it was almost like it was wasted. That the team was rebuilding. It was, going through transition. But it just, we only wished better for Cory. And, last night we talked about him on the flagship Let's Go Devils podcast at 9 p.m. Eastern on Sundays, that it just feels bad. And you kind of almost hope as a fan a miracle would happen with Cory coming back, with the team, but it doesn't seem like it will.
Well, there's a number of interesting, side stories to this, because you know how you alluded to a moment ago, you said that it's almost like his prime was wasted. Well, if you think about this, this is kind of the decision that Taylor Hall is going through right now. And I do think that the possibility of re-signing him plays heavily into this decision, because they have got to prove to Taylor Hall that they are serious about winning. And I don't know how much longer you could continue to let this continue, where you put him out there. And, I mean, let's be honest, he has gotten shelled in some of these games this year. And I don't know if it's mental. I don't know if it's physical. But to me, and, you know, you and I were talking earlier this week. I was down in Florida. I was at the Panthers game. I was watching the Panthers take on the Winnipeg Jets. And I got to say hello to Brian Boyle, former Devil Brian Boyle, for a couple of minutes. You know, this is a very, very critical juncture for this franchise right now, because they have got to prove to Taylor Hall that they are serious about winning. If you look at the numbers over the years, he has not put up the numbers that justify being an elite goalie in this league. 112 and 131 and 49 in 304 games. That's not an elite goaltender. And if you want to get this guy to stay, and I still do think that Taylor Hall is going to re-sign, I do. But they've got to do something. And, you know, Mac Black has looked fantastic, but he's also still very young. And what do they do if he regresses? Which is why maybe Schneider goes to the AHL. Maybe he gets whatever is ailing him worked out. You know, not the end of the road, but I just don't think, from a franchise perspective, I just don't think you can put him out there anymore until he gets his head on.
Yeah, and another intangible that we talked about on last night's podcast, and we were kind of goofing around about it, but the more I thought about it, you know, after this transaction happened, what happens to Jack Hughes? I mean, Cory Schneider stepped up to the plate and said, Jack, you could stay at my place. You know, you could, a young 18-year-old kid, just turned 18 years old. Here's Cory Schneider, steps up to the plate and says, you can stay with my family. And in your first year. Kind of reminds me of Mario Lemieux when he stepped up to the plate when Sidney Crosby was first drafted. It's got to be awkward for Jack. I mean, knowing that Cory's in Binghamton and staying in that home, but at the same time, you know, it's just part of life as an NHLer. It's a business, and this transaction needed to be done. Recalling Domingue up and let Cory fix his game now, because the team needs him right now. They're riding the hot hand. But what happens if, you know, Mackenzie Blackwood gets cold? You know, there really isn't a bona fide, you know, second string backup goaltender right now.
No, there's not, but I think you make a very good point. More than anything at all, what the fans have to remember is that this is first and foremost a business. And in any business, when you don't perform, you're not going to be employed there, or, you know, changes are going to happen. He has not performed. You know, the whole Taylor Hall situation, this, to me, and you and I have talked about this before on the podcast, you know, I think, you know, and this is one of the reasons I've said many, many times, not only on this podcast, but also up here in Vermont, the Devils somehow have to find a way to get Scott Stevens back into this franchise. They need to put him in some type of leadership role, because, you know, there are rumors, and there's a lot of Devils fans that are mad at Taylor Hall, to be honest with you. They think that he doesn't want to be here. Well, first and foremost, they got to find out whether he wants to be here. Okay? And then someone like a Stevens or a Danico or a Marty, say to him, listen, this is your chance to make this your team, like a Lemieux, like a Crosby. I mean, there's rumors about him going back to Edmonton. That's Connor McDavid's team, and it's going to be Connor McDavid's team. So if you want to be an icon to a franchise, this is your chance. I mean, you know, and I've said this many times, he's going to get 10 to 12 million a year wherever he goes. Do you want to go somewhere and win, or do you just want to put the money in the bank? I mean, and you know, I'm not a very big fan of Ilya Kovalchuk. Well, look what happened to him. Things haven't worked out that well for him going for the money.
Yeah. Yeah, and right now at this moment, things are really not going well for Kovalchuk, as basically the team said you're not playing, right? So anything can happen in the NHL, and with Corey, being sent down. Now you have Domingue, recalled. Could you tell me a little bit about Louis Domingue? Have you seen him play at all? And what's the scouting report on him?
Well, basically, he was, a backup for the Tampa Bay Lightning. He had one good year. I believe he was 21-8 or something like that. But, I think it was more of a numbers thing in Tampa Bay where they, didn't know what they were going to be able to do because they spent a ton of money signing Vasilevsky. And they wanted to make sure that they had that taken care of. I mean, lifetime, I think he's 55 and 49. But, I mean, if you look at his numbers, he started back in 2014, 2015, back with the Arizona Coyotes. He had a really good year, 2018, 2019. He was 21-5 with the Lightning as a backup role. Decent numbers, 908 save percentage, 2.88 goals against. But, again, maybe the Devils don't even know what they have here. I think, as you said, a moment ago, they knew that they had to do something. I think it's a move that the business part of the team had been working on for a while. And I really do believe that a lot of this has to do with what they're going to do with Taylor Hall. I think that, maybe they go to him now and say, listen, we're serious about winning, but there's a lot of issues this team has that we haven't even gotten to yet.
Yeah, and speaking of Schneider, I can't imagine a team picking him up on waivers right now. So let's just assume that he is in the AHL, working on his game in Binghamton. How tradable is he at this point? I mean, he still has a a bigger size contract, but like, which team would want him and want to take on that salary? Now, obviously, the Devils will have to help out with some of that, but what do you think Schneider goes from here?
Well, I think he's got to prove that he can play. I think that is a really, really big question mark for him because, he looked lights out the end of last year. He also looked lights out in preseason. But when the games matter, he doesn't seem to be able to do it. And I think he's got to prove not only to the Devils, but I think he's got to prove to the league that he can still play. I mean, I think that his best years are behind him, and there's a lot of folks that think he's serviceable as a backup. But there's not too many teams that are going to pay a backup $6 million a year.
No, not at all. And then the other thing, again, if I was going to be a fortune teller or a genie looking into the future, do you recall him back up if any injury happens to Mackenzie Blackwood or Louis Domingue? Or do you still keep him down there and bring somebody else up so he can work on his game?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on how the season goes. I mean, this is basically the Devils saying to Blackwood that this is your chance. You want it to be a number one goalie, and he's played very well. I mean, that was a crazy game the other night up in Montreal where the Devils get that goal disallowed, which would have been the game-winning goal, and then they come back and win that game in overtime. Talk about a momentum builder. I think it depends where the season goes. And, again, with it being a business, you don't know what Shiro's got going on. I mean, there have been some crazy stories out there. We've talked about this before about what potentially the Devils could get if they trade Taylor Hall. And if you get a couple of first-round, picks and, elite prospects, you know what? Maybe you make that trade, and maybe you get another team that wants to, get rid of his salary. There's been a lot of talk, and I don't know if this is a legitimate rumor or not because I haven't really heard it more than one or two places, but there's been talks that the Devils are talking to the Kings about Jonathan Quick, who's another goaltender that's a mess right now. So,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think it really depends on whether or not or how their season goes. You put 4 or 5 wins together and you start moving up closer to that wild card position, then things really get interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that whole Jonathan Quick, thing, I'm not a big proponent of trading one mess for another, and it's just, right now, look, the Devils are on a winning streak right now, and going into Tuesday night's game against the Bruins, I'm assuming that Mackenzie Blackwood is going to get another start. Let's see how Mackenzie Blackwood performs. I mean, now that Schneider is down in the AHL, it's really his team. I'm interested to see how he performs, because sometimes you need some goalies just need that competition, but I think that you're right, Bruce. The whole Taylor Hall situation, it's ongoing. There must be something that Ray Shero is doing right now. We don't know what that is. That's why we talk about it. But I've seen some scenarios about Calgary. I've read online, but it's anyone's guess. But going back to what Elliot Friedman had said, previously, that a deal's not going to get done, till the summer. I don't know if I would hold on to Taylor Hall at this point. And do you? I can't believe I'm even saying this, because it sounds impossible. But do you package Schneider and Hall together to make a trade, using Hall as the bait, but also getting out of that salary that Cory Schneider has?
Well, it wouldn't be the first time something like that has happened, and it's certainly a possibility. Again, I think a lot of it depends on how the season goes. But again, and this, Sam, and a lot of the folks listening know this, hockey is a very mental game, okay? So you can have all the skills in the world, but if your head is not in the right place, it's a very, very difficult game to play. He does not look like, in the last 5 or 6 games that I've seen, he does not look like he's got the confidence. He's got to go down there to the AHL with a good attitude, and he's got to prove that he can still play this game. I don't know if anybody's going to pick him up. I'm not sure that I would. However, what you said about Quick is also right. Like, you don't want one mess for another. There's been rumors. I was reading something over the weekend when I was down in Florida about, maybe Braden Holtby being a possibility for the Devils, because the Capitals may want to move on from him. So maybe you make a package deal like that. I mean, Braden Holtby's a pretty good netminder.
Oh yeah, and I think he tied Marty Brodeur's regular season record for the most wins in the regular season. Am I correct? A couple years ago,
I believe he did tie. I think it was 48. I believe that's right.
Yeah. I mean, you make a great point there. But right now the Devils, they need to regroup. It's been a slow start to the season. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that, because the first 2 periods of the season, everything was looking very glorious for Cory Schneider till that the cramping and the injury again. So again, anything can happen at any given moment. The Devils are on a 2-game winning streak. You need to build on that. And Bruce, looking forward with this team, and is it too early to I'm trying to gather my thoughts here, because it's like it's Jekyll and Hyde, because we're seeing flashes of brilliance, and we're also seeing flashes of just terrible hockey. There's just absolutely no consistency. I guess what I'm trying to ask is, do you think that this team is just, I don't know, do you still go hard at it and save this season, being just towards the bottom, knowing that the statistics of that it's very rare that teams make the playoffs when they're in I guess 12th place or lower at this point? I know that sounds hard it sounds kind of negative, but I mean, where does this team go? I mean, they still need to find their identity.
Well, let me pose a question to you. And if you think about what the St. Louis Blues did last year, winning the Stanley Cup, they had the worst record in the league at one point.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that the Devils this year have the same talent that the St. Louis Blues did, but this raises another question, which we haven't even really touched on yet. And I'll pose this question to you because you're with them every day and you're talking about them every day. Is John Hines your coach?
Well, it seems like he's Ray Shero's coach. I know a lot of fans don't want him as coach. I mean, even in last night's podcast, they wanted to have a John Hines roast the next podcast. I mean, that's how the fans are feeling. But, it obviously is Ray Shero's guy because, had this been under Lou Lamoriello, suppose, he would have been gone 3 years ago.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, they have got the most talent that they've had in a while. And I think it's time to finish with the rebuilding. And I do agree with a lot of the fans that say that consistency comes on the coaching staff. I've said this to you many, many times. I think it was a terrible mistake that the team made, letting Scott Stevens leave the organization. He is one of the best defensemen in history. He's an NHL icon. He would bring instant respect to that franchise. And I would put him behind the bench. I've said that to you many times. But again, it's a question of, at what point, and here's another question. I mean, at what point is Ray Shero accountable for this?
Yeah. I mean, he came in around 2015, and then Lou had left, and then a few years have gone by. Yeah. When is he going to be held accountable? But I think right now, again, it's just who's going to fire Ray? Ownership group? I mean, they seem like they are very, just judging by their the Philadelphia 76ers and what they've done so far with the Devils, it seems like they just stick with the team, with that one guy, and they ride it as long as they can. And they seem like they're a very overly patient ownership group, but at the same time, again, we holler about this all the time on the podcast. When does that accountability happen, and when does it start? And it just seems like, just when we think like they're going to be winning again, they'll blow another game, blow another lead. I mean, blowing a lot of these leads, I think they already have left probably about 10 to 12 points on the table by blowing these leads, and we're only in mid-November at this point.
Well, that falls on the coaching staff. It really does. I do think it's too early to, fold the cards, if you will, and give up on the season. But at some point, you need someone behind the bench there. I mean, they've already got the assistant general manager behind the bench. Who else has to go back there? I mean, I'm not really sure what else you can do short of changing the coaching staff. They've got an AHL coaching staff. It is what it is. I mean, think about some of the players that you could put back there. And, it's funny, I'm following your Facebook feed right now, and somebody wrote in, I mean, Stevens, Brodeur, Elias, you have Hall of Famers in your organization. I would rather have that than an AHL coach behind the bench. And I'm just being honest with you.
Yeah, and it seemed like when Shero came in, and then once Lou left for Toronto, it just seemed like the organization itself was cleaning house. Marty was in St. Louis. Stevens was nowhere to be found. I think he was on the NHL Network. Elias was dealing with injuries. That entire before he did that one last lap. At the during warmups, and it just seems like the entire organization was just wiped to a clean slate and started building back up again. But then Marty Brodeur came back. He actually came back as a role executive, as a VP, but more on the business side of things. So, it would be nice to see Scott Stevens back in the mix or Patrick Elias. And I think Pandolfo and Chris Terreri and all of them have moved on, and David Conti and all them. But it would be nice to see some leadership back there. And when you heard the original interview with PK Subban talking about being on the New Jersey Devils, and he was going through the tradition of, playing solid defense, playing smart, and this and that. That's what they need to be doing right now. And that's why they're giving up goals late in the third period, and that's where the inconsistency lies. They need to fix that right now. It's they're on a 2-game winning streak, but they need to build upon that and start shutting them down. And I think what they really need right now, Bruce, is a stopper on defense. They need a shutdown defenseman badly right now.
Well, when you have one of the greatest defensemen in NHL history in your stable there, why would you not have him or find room for him on your coaching staff?
Beats me. I'm still wondering that too. I'm still wondering that too. I mean, you know what? The way Scott Stevens led by example and the way Scott Stevens played the game, I would love for him to turn that defense around, playing his style and playing tough, but yet a simple game where you're not out of position, that you're protecting the goalie and at all costs. And I like the guys like Scott Stevens that didn't have to shout and make motivational speeches in the locker room. Just his presence alone, and even Cam Jansen even said that on a previous podcast of ours, that just the presence alone is just enough to command respect. And I think that's what the Devils need. I don't understand. I know the players are saying the right things. That it's not the coaching staff, it's them. But it almost seems like at times that the team itself is getting outcoached. And one part that fans always look at is that how many line changes does John Hines make during the game when a line is on fire?
No, absolutely. And again, you have to continue developing some of these players, Nico and Jack Hughes and some of the other younger players, Blake Coleman, that they're trying to continue to develop. Has the game changed a little bit since Stevens was, in the league? Yeah, absolutely. But he's still one of the greatest defensemen in the history of the game. And if you're telling me that, and I've had this argument with my own colleagues here, if you're saying that you would rather have an AHL assistant coach as opposed to Scott Stevens, then you don't know enough about hockey.
Yeah. Well, Bruce, thank you so much for taking a time out for this breaking news today, and hope to have you on the podcast soon.
Well, I appreciate it, Sam. And like I said, I was kind of surprised when I got the word from the league actually that this had happened. And I was going to call you to chat about it, but a big day for the franchise, and we'll see where they go from here. I do think that there may be some other moves coming down the pipe.
Agreed. And of course, we'll have you on when that happens. Thanks, Bruce.
Well, I appreciate the time, and it's a great podcast. Thank you, and thanks to the boys for having me on.
Thank you. That is Bruce Zeman of Vox Sports, NHL analyst, also has the #1 morning show out in beautiful Vermont. That's what the rumors have it. Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitter, Periscope. You guys are just firing away. The most commented Devils podcast in the history of New Jersey Devils podcasts. I'm going to start reading some of these comments. They're just coming flying through. Let's start with Facebook Live. Nico Bernal, what do you think about Bryce Salvador as coach, not necessarily head coach? You know what, Nico? This is what I think. I think he's definitely qualified to be an assistant coach, Bryce Salvador. But you know what? I think he's in a good place right now. Think about it. He's definitely getting better. And each year that goes by, he's getting better and better and better. I love his analysis on the MSG networks. That's how you pronounce it. With Erica Wachter. I think he's you know what? I think Bryce is doing pretty well for himself right now. But yeah, it would be cool if he was coach of the team, because I think he can offer some great insight. See, 10 to 12 points blown. We're on top team in the league. Anthony, Adam, Georgia. Yes, you are correct. Devane Hill writes, look at Gretzky. He is the best, but coaching was not one of them. True. But Gretzky, to be fair, it's not like Gretzky was handed a great team either to coach. Obviously Gretzky knows the game, as well as anybody. Just because you don't have success doesn't mean you're a good coach. But again, after all, it's a results-oriented business. You got to win. If you don't win, you're out of here. Salvador would be just a puppet, JD. Oh, look at these comments. They're just filing in. All right, so I'm going to switch it to YouTube Live. I'm going to go to YouTube Live, our YouTube channel. Let's go, Devils. Going to YouTube Live right now. And let's see some of the comments that are coming in. I'm just loading. Hopefully the thing doesn't play on air like it did before when I had Bruce on. I didn't know how to shut it off. Stupid volume button didn't work. So going into YouTube Live. Well, let's see. BS Sportsnet. nice handle. Holland Smith for Goudreau and Hannafin. I like that. Not bad. Besides, I got to get out of YouTube Live. They hate me anyway. Always negative comments about me. Let's see here. Twitter, Periscope, at Let's Go Devils Pod. Again, it's at Let's Go Devils Pod. See any comments here? I don't know how to do it. Well, can't read the comments at the moment, but we'd like to thank all of you joining our breaking news podcast. Cory Schneider has been placed on waivers and about to be sent down to Binghamton. Louis Domingue recalled. We assume he's backing up Mackenzie Blackwood. And also, JD writes, we love you here, Sam. Yes, Facebook Live. I love Facebook Live. You guys love me. YouTube Live, they stink. Probably because they're probably more Android users. Let me ask you guys, are you guys iPhone users or Android users? I got to know, because our demographics say that we're 74% iPhone users. Yeah, that's where we get a lot of our traffic. Kurt, I love you too. We got to sit down. We got to have some salads. I got to lose some weight. Anyway, because the camera adds 25 pounds to you. Anyway, boom goes the dynamite. The game has changed. Looking through this. Betty, I see you in the chat. room. Hello, Betty. Cheryl Miller, iPhone. Great podcast, Sam. Thank you, Brian Moore. iPhone. Michael Gepetti. Yes. Look at this. I got an iPhone, and it's still an iPhone 6S. It made the iOS cutoff. I'm so happy. We love the woo rants. The best part when we lose. All right, you guys want to hear a woo rant? You want to hear a woo rant? Who wants to hear a woo rant? Show me some love in the Facebook Live group, Twitter Periscope. Show me some hearts. YouTube Live, just stop commenting. You guys always depress me. Kurt says, I'm in Jamaica. This sounds great, man. Yeah, he's a Rangers fan. And I hope he stays in Jamaica. Monty, giving me a big woo. Monty. See, Sam Wu in 2020. Yes, I actually made the age requirement to submit my papers of running for president of the United States. Yes, I qualify. Yes, I was born here. Yes, I've been a citizen since I've been born here, and I am over the age of 35. And the first thing I'm going to do is kick out all the Ranger fans out of New York. And then I'm going to put an Amtrak through Madison Square Garden, the most famous train station in the world. Anyway, as I'm BSing and ranting and this and that and all this gibberish nonsense, thank you for joining the Breaking News podcast. And we will be on standby if anything were to happen in the next 48 hours. You never know what may happen. And also, Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, this Wednesday, State of Fan Address episode 31. Nick Villano and I will dissect what has gone on. I think he has a special guest. I know he has a special guest. I got to confirm with him. And also, I will be at the Devils Rangers game. Not Devils Rangers. Devils Bruins game on Tuesday night, tomorrow night. Come by PJ Ryan's, stop by, say hi. I'm probably going to eat there. You know, I'll be with my wife, so be nice to her, people. I'm supposed to be on my best behavior. We have Arlette's tickets tomorrow night. And also, I'll possibly be there on the 16th. Oh, I got my dates mixed up. The 23rd against Detroit. Possibly be there. Penn State is playing Ohio State in the early afternoon. Shall Penn State fall to Ohio State? I'm doubtful to go into that game against Detroit because now that I'm a public figure, I can't be in a bad mood and be nasty to people. But if Penn State does win over Ohio State, you betcha I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be wearing this hat, the lucky hat. All righty. Well, everybody wants to meet Mrs. Wu. Yeah, I like Mrs. Wu. Yeah, just a short tidbit. How hard we work for this podcast. Transmission lines blew in my Jeep. And I'm going to have to be nice to Mrs. Wu now because she's going to be having to drive Mr. Wu all over the place. All righty. That's it for now. Just follow us on Facebook /Let's Go Devils Podcast. You could follow us on Twitter, Periscope, at Let's Go Devils Pod. And our YouTube Live page, YouTube Live channel at Let's Go Devils. Or it's just Let's Go Devils channel. Alrighty. I'm going to be out of here. I'm just trying to get everything all squared away before I sign off. Oh, yeah, and also we're on Twitch and streaming live audio streaming on letsgodevils.com. You can find this podcast shortly in the next half an hour and all of our podcasts. Till next time, Devils fans, let's go Devils!